Good morning, everyone. I want to talk to you in this video about the seven sacred spaces of a monastery. I'll come back to what those are in just a moment. But I want us to draw on the wisdom of monks and nuns who have withdrawn from the world and have had to structure their lives in an entirely different kind of way um, to enrich their spirituality and to maintain community. Um, in a world that in some ways is very different from the world that you and I would normally inhabit. But I think in this time of enforced lockdown, as it were, where many of us, most of us, to some extent, have had to withdraw from the normal rhythms and patterns of our lives and have found ourselves kind of forced into new patterns of relationship and community, which presents all kinds of challenges to us. It's difficult to be. It's easy to become disorientated. It can be difficult to find our way through all of that. So I want to use this model of community life from the monastery to see if that has something to offer us about how we order our lives. I think one of the things that many of us are finding is that we have to reimagine and find a new structure to our day and to our week that helps to shape things. If we try and sort of with a more laissez-faire, just kind of let things happen and unfold, often we find things that aren't important or that aren't important dominating, whereas the important things get pushed continually further and further back, and we never have time for those. So here we go. So the seven sacred spaces are, and in the interest of high-tech presentations, etc., are these. These are the seven spaces. So you have the chapel, the garden, the chapter, the scriptorium, the cell, the cloister, and the refectory. And all of these spaces were part of the life of the monastery. So you might want to pause and scribble those down while you make some notes if you want to. But I'm going to take us through those one at a time. So, first of all, the chapel in the monastery is obviously the place where the community, the worshiping community, gathered for prayer and worship. So, to what extent is possible for you at home to have a place where you are be able to pray or worship with other people? Now, just pause for a moment and acknowledge that all of our households are different and face different challenges. Where we have young children at home, that presents a different set of challenges. Where we live on our own, where we live in a household where perhaps one or more of the people we live with are not professing Christians, may struggle with aspects of faith. So you have to filter and interpret these spaces as best you can within your own context. For some, it will be easier than others. I understand that. But hopefully for each one of us, there'll be something here. So a chapel is a space where you regularly meet and pray with one or more other people. As I said, where you physically can't gather in larger groups, you may be able to form something online. Now, whether you do that live, or whether you have form a little WhatsApp group, a little prayer triplet WhatsApp group, or something similar to that, where you can share prayer needs and pray for one another. With WhatsApp groups, by the way, if you don't know, you can video chat on those as well. So, and if you know somebody who's not online, but you can phone them up and pray with them over the phone, perhaps even sing with them over the phone, something like that. But it's just a place where you're gathering with other people to pray and worship together. So that's the chapel. Perhaps lots of different ways of doing that that you can think of. Secondly, the garden. The garden was a really important place in a monastery, not least because it's where they grew all their own fruit and vegetables and largely were self-sufficient. But the garden represents that space where you work with somebody to produce something, where you're creative, where you work towards a common task. In this instance, it may be something you do with somebody else. That would be great, or it may be something you do on your own. You pick up one of your hobbies, start up a brand new hobby, start up a brand new enterprise where you're doing something practical and physical. It may be getting out in the garden if you've got a garden, and spending a little bit more time there. If you're in a flat somewhere, perhaps a window box or something like that, if that's possible. Maybe a bit of DIY around the house. There's lots of jokes going around about it's normally aimed at men who've said, I'll get around to that one day. Well, now you've got time to do that, so let's get on to that to-do list of all the things that we were going to do together. Might be your daily exercise, but something that's physical, that gets you out, that perhaps gets your heart rate up a little bit, something where you work together. Sorry, I'm jotting down things in random order. Might be something musical or creative, but anyway, a garden where you're working together, labouring together, producing something together, and just very aware of the world around you. The third space is the chapter. Now, this potentially is the trickiest one to navigate. The chapter was where the monks would hold themselves mutually accountable to one another. It was where decisions were taken about how the monastery was operating, where things were going well, where things are not going well. It was a place potentially of tension, of debate and argument, but with a commitment to a better way of life and to hearing and listening to one another. So this is hard at the moment, but I think it's really important that we recognise that living under these circumstances can't be easy, that tensions can build up if they're not dealt with properly, can become quite destructive for individuals. And so making sure that there's some space in the way your household is operating where you can talk stuff through. How's it going? Maybe once a week, just have a little bit of a round table meeting. Are we happy with what's going on? How the jobs are being shared? Is one person carrying more than their fair share? Is somebody not pulling their weight? Could do a little bit more? Those sorts of things. So a chapter is a really tricky but important space to have, so that tension doesn't build up and resentment starts to build up with some people. So that's the chapel. The scriptorium is the monasteries often had substantial libraries where the monks and the nuns could go and read and study and to stimulate their minds. So there's a whole wealth of things that you can be thinking about here. Depending on how your day is structured and your week is structured, maybe set apart a bit of time today to visit the scriptorium, get a book out you've been meaning to read for a while, watch a documentary that you had been meaning to watch, something that really stimulates and stretches your mind, grows in your knowledge and your understanding, and it may be theological, something to do with faith, but it may be something in the wider world outside, something that you've been interested in for a while and you just want to learn more, expand your understanding and gain in knowledge and understanding of what world is all about. So there's lots of things that you can do. There's loads of resources. As I said, it may be a book you've been meaning to read for a while, going online, topic areas that you'd always been interested in and never had the time. So think about how you might use this time to enrich your learning. The cell is the place where the monks withdrew to be on their own, to be solitary, just to spend time alone with God. And depending on our household and how it is structured, that may be easier for some than for others. There may be a physical space you can go to where you can be alone. For others, it may be a particular time of the day, either late in the evening or early in the morning, or there may be a window in the middle of the day where you know you can be alone and largely uninterrupted as far as that's possible. But at this time, it's really important that we spend time alone with God in our prayers, in silence. Don't be afraid of silence. It's okay just to be still in the silence and to allow God to speak to us in those sorts of situations. But the cell, just psychologically having a time. You may need to negotiate with people in your household when you're going to be in your cell so you're not disturbed. They understand that. And be realistic about how long you need for that, what's good. For some people who are familiar with silent times of prayer, you can spend longer in that, but perhaps if that's tricky, shorter times, or maybe multiple times in the day, sort of 10 minutes, 50 minutes first thing in the morning, maybe something around lunchtime, just to come away and pause and be silent for a little while, and then again in the evening, observing some of the offices of the day. So that's the cell. The cloister, love the idea of the cloister, particularly at this kind of time. It's where if you've ever been to a cathedral, you'll know exactly what a cloister looks like, sort of a large squared area where there's covered spaces, but also a large central grassed area. And depending on the weather, the monks would be able to wander about. And it's where they met together for either planned or unplanned encounters with each other. It's where they connected to talk about all manner of things, sometimes more serious things, other times more informal. But they'd wander into the cloister and see who's about, or arrange to meet so-and-so in the cloister. I'll see it in the corner by the whatever statue it was, and we'll catch up on whatever it is we'll catch up on. And there's loads of ways that we can have a cloister, a space where we connect with people. Social media and telephones enable us to do that in all kinds of ways. Sometimes we may arrange to meet up with somebody online for a video chat, or a telephone conversation, a longer chat, or it might just be a quick message to somebody. How are you doing? Was thinking about you today. Might be a little WhatsApp group. I'm in a small WhatsApp group with a few ministers, and we occasionally in the middle of the day we'll just ping a daft message off to the other. Are you around out there? How's your day going? Sort of briefly wander into that cloister space and catch up with people. So the cloister is all kinds of interactions with people. And also in your household, it may be that time you set aside, you all agree, whether it's 11 o'clock in the morning or mid-afternoon or something, where you all stop doing whatever it is you're doing, put the kettle on, make a cup of tea, and you all sit in the lounge or something for a chat and a catch-up, find out how everybody's day is going on. And lastly, the refectory. The refectory is where the monks or the nuns gathered for their meal times, and they would sit together, and these were sacred times where over food they prepared together. So you may want to consider how you could all become more involved in food preparation, whether it might not be practical for all of you to be involved every time a meal is prepared, but to share that or to be part of producing the meals and then sitting down. I'm really hoping that for many of us we'll recover family meal times, gathering around tables and rediscovering the art of conversation. I know we've certainly enjoyed recovering our evening meals together and making sure whatever else has gone on during the day, we try and sit down together in the evening and have a meal together and catch up with one another, although that's slightly strange because we've been in the same house all day anyway. But recovering meals times together is really, really important. So with these 7 spaces, what is critical to this is all of these are necessary to not just the emotional and relational well-being of the community, but to the spiritual well-being of the community. That within the monastery, everyone believed that in any one of these spaces, God was also present, and God could be encountered, and our spiritual lives would be enriched. So God was not just in the cell in silent prayer, and God was not just in the chapel when we gathered for worship, but God could be found in the garden when we worked together and did stuff together. God could be found in the library when we pulled a book off the shelf, whatever the book was about, or turned on the television or went online to look at something, that we might encounter God in those spaces as well. That God was certainly around our meal tables, and God was present in those conversations as well. And that in those times where we sat down to talk about how things were going in the chapel, in the chapter, there was no doubt that we might encounter God in that space as well. So have a think about how these 7 spaces might help shape your life and bring a little bit of structure and order to your life. But more importantly, reminding yourself that in every single one of these spaces, it's quite possible for you to find God in new ways and creative ways to enrich your life and enrich your love and sense of community, not just with those around you, but with all the people who you love and who may come into your lives. That your neighbours and friends, your church community will be enriched because of your time spent wandering about your own personal monastery. God bless you all. Amen.